Comparisons and commentary. First, let me start by comparing copyright history to that of the United States and modern times. Reading through the history of copyright, I did not envision the English Renaissance, but rather what I envisioned to be the modern entertainment industry, specifically the music industry, as well as their battles with modern piracy. Queen Mary's Charter to me represents the Recording Industry Association of America, or the RIAA. I would compare the RIAA to that of the guilds of Renaissance England. Although I do not see the RIAA trying to censor recording artists, the RIAA takes the role of controlling the business aspect of the recording industry. They work to ensure that sound recordings sold in the United States are legitimate. And just like the printers of the 1600s, they can at times take advantage of the artists. As an MTV Behind the Music fan, I hear recording artists tell stories about how they make little to no money off of record sales. Most of their income comes from touring and other self-promoting methods. One good example of this comes from one of my favorite bands, the Goo Goo Dolls. The mold of Renaissance England copyright procedures seems to fit the contract that the Goo Goo Dolls signed with their first record company, entitled Metal Blade. The Goo Goo Dolls' first contract was signed by Johnny Rzeznik, the lead singer and guitarist for the Goo Goo Dolls. Johnny was not very business savvy and more so excited for the idea of his first record deal. The contract was much like that of the contract between authors in the 1600s and the guilds which purchased their work. Metal Blade, the name of the company Johnny signed with, had exclusive rights to print, sell, and distribute the band's music. Once the record company bought the rights to the band's music, they retained those rights for 5 albums. The last album under Metal Blade was entitled A Boy Named Goo, and it went double platinum. This may sound like they sold a lot of records, and it also should sound like the Goo Goo Dolls made a lot of money from this, but they were receiving no royalty checks. In fact, in the early stages of the contract, the band received a bill for studio time and production. Metal Blade basically thought that the deal did the band a favor by giving them exposure, so in the contract the record company controlled the income of the sales. The band was forced to tour with no money and no help from the record company, playing summerfests just to break even. Now, you may be thinking, boo-hoo for them, they got to play concerts for their summer job. But this is not something that is fair while the record company sits back and makes money off of the band. Much like the author-printer relationship of the 16 and 1700s. The producers made all of the money off of the talent. When Queen Mary's Charter expired, the Printers Guild had to lobby for a new deal. While in limbo, the guild was forced to sit back and watch smaller printers print guild books at cheaper costs, and watch inexpensive copies of guild books turn up at markets without penalty. This made me think of the bootleggers on the city streets hawking their inexpensive copies of movies, not even in the theaters yet in the United States. Or, more relevant to our group's project, sites like Napster or Pirate Bay being allowed to reign free on the open market. With no regulation and no rules, people are able to buy, sell, and trade whatever they please, regardless of ownership rights. How does this encourage artists to produce and share the next great work? Is the production of the art satisfying enough to the artist, or do they deserve the right to make a living? What incentive is there for an artist to work hard and devote their life to their work? I believe that's why there are some regulatory measures in place for intellectual property. I do not think Renaissance England did it correctly by taking copyright away from the artist and putting it into the hands of the producers. I also think that the Goo Goo Dolls situation is very similar to that and was also not fair. But I do think we are starting to see the rules come around to benefit all parties involved in intellectual property. As we move forward, and the Statute of Anne was adopted, the British did not think about works being produced outside of their major territories. This to me was as foolish as the fireworks laws in this country. I believe in fire safety and respect that the things are dangerous. But if I really want fireworks for the 4th of July, I'm going to get them. All one has to do is drive across the border into Indiana, purchase the goods, don't get pulled over coming back into Illinois, and you can sure have a heck of a good time. Let's say that copyright laws differ in the same way that the fireworks laws did from state to state. And let's use Wisconsin and Illinois as an example. Let's say that it is illegal to copy any intellectual property in Illinois. However, it's fair in Wisconsin to copy and distribute any type of intellectual property. Now, I'm 20 minutes from Wisconsin. What's to stop me from taking that 20-minute drive to the outlet malls at Pleasant Prairie for every birthday and special occasion? Because of an example like this, printers and producers want more protection over their goods. This is why the Berne Convention Agreement was enacted. As I said in the previous video, this made for more international control over intellectual property. Since its original signing in 1886, the Berne Convention has grown and is still in place today. But even with the Berne Convention, the United States has still had problems with international piracy, especially from communist countries, who believe that intellectual property belongs to the state, not the artist. The biggest producers of the piracy of American intellectual property have been China and Russia. However, piracy is not limited to just those two countries. What this shows is that although there are laws in place to protect producers of intellectual property, there is never full protection. And with the advent of the internet, piracy has been made that much easier. This will be looked at further in the Pirate Bay and Napster section of the video. As we move ahead, the invention of new technologies and new forms of intellectual property have been great for artists, producers, and legal consumers alike. But it has also made piracy that much easier. As the intellectual property industries continue to evolve, so too must the laws that protect them.